أعز المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين سيما بقية الله روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد. Dear Mu'mineen and Mu'minat, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Condolences on the martyrdom anniversary of Amirul Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst the sincere lovers and followers of Imam Amirul Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. And may he make us amongst those who read about the life of the Imam and the words of the Imam and try and gain lessons and follow the advice of the Imam salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. One of the concepts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly reminds us in the Holy Quran is the concept of death. The concept of death, according to the Holy Quran, according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not simply an end, yet it is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a purpose. Some philosophers, looking at death, they gave two options. In fact, in a famous statement for Socrates as he was being basically executed, some of his last words, according to his students, were the following. He said, "What you're doing to me in terms of the execution will bring nothing but death. And death is not outside one of those two things. Either you think that death is the end of consciousness, where we no longer understand or see or are no longer aware of anything. That is one of the possibilities of death. And according to this possibility, he says, well, if I'm not conscious, unaware, I will not be suffering. There's no suffering, there's no pain, there's nothing. And this is the view, obviously, of the atheist, the non-believers, that death is the end, and after death there's nothing. And that is the end of consciousness. There's no more consciousness, according to them, after death. They call that the state of oblivion, being completely unaware, unconscious of anything. That's it. It's the end. That is one possibility given by some atheists or non-believers. And he states there that to them, perhaps because they were non-believers, those who were prosecuting him and executing him, perhaps were non-believers. So he's saying to them, according to you, you're bringing no pain to me. You're not doing anything that is going to harm me. It's one point, and that's it. It's the end. He says, on the other hand, if you are executing me and it is not the end, if death is not the end, it's the continuation of consciousness, then it would bring nothing but pleasure to me, because I'll be free of you. Meaning those who are executing him, those who are trying to cause him pain and suffering. And this world is filled with such people, and therefore death would be nothing but a pleasure. So either way, you cannot do much to me. That was a great statement if you think of it, in the sense that we cannot be a third of two. We either believe that death is the end, absolute end, or we believe that death is a transition. If one believes that death is the end, if any of us believes that death is the absolute end, there's nothing after it. Basically, when one dies, it's the end of consciousness, awareness, any feelings, any emotions, it all finishes with death. If that is what one believes, then why would they fear death? Where does the fear of death come from? For non-believers, where does the fear of death come from? If it is the end and you're not conscious, I'll ask the question in a little more elaboration. Often one is worried, even if we are talking from a worldly perspective. We're not talking about the hereafter. Worldly perspective, if someone is worried, okay, what are the worries? One possibility of what happens to my children, where I will be completely unaware of it, so what does it matter? If I'm oblivion, if I'm completely unaware, unconscious of anything that will happen to anyone after me, then what does it matter? My wealth, my children, my wife, any of that, why would it matter then? So obviously fear of death is a sign of a level of belief. And I say a level. What that level is should determine how we treat death. Imam Amirul Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, in a statement, he says to someone who was asking him for advice, a man came and he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, adni, advise me. So the Imam gives him a maw'adha starting with, La takun, do not be amongst those people. You want to have maw'adha, do not be amongst those people. A list of people the Imam lists for him. Many different people he lists for him. One of them, he says, are those who fear death because of their sins. Those who have the fear of death as a result of their sins, yet are still involved in what they fear death because of. Many of us, when we look at death, and I say it, and I want us to reflect on that, if I die tonight, if tonight is my end, what is going to happen? Am I ready for it? Let us ask ourselves that question. This is what the Imam is giving maw'idha. He says, do not be amongst those who fear death because of their sins. yet are still involved in the things that they fear death because of. So if I fear death because of my sins, why am I continuously sinning then? Do I not realize that death is a truth and it's created from the time I am born? It's created with me. My death is created with me from the time I'm born. In one of his the statements of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he says, خُطَّ الْمَوْتُ. Death is written on the children of Adam the way the girls wear their necklaces. A girl wearing the necklace, how close is the necklace to them? That is how death is to us. It's with us. Amirul Mu'mineen, in another statement describing death, some of the most beautiful, elaborate descriptions, like constantly we read in dua Abu Hamza Thumali. Abi Hamza is one of the companions of Imam Zayn al-Abidin salawatullah wa salamu alayh, who learned the dua from the Imam, and therefore it's known after him. It's named after this great companion who passed on this dua to us. I urge my brothers and sisters, at least once in this month of Ramadan, at least once, recite this dua with reflection. Don't just recite the dua. Recite the dua with reflection. Read the meanings. If you don't know the Arabic, read the meaning. Let it be, even if you recite a quarter of it every night and reflect on it well, spend an hour of reflecting on this dua. In a part of it, he says, he describes the state of death. He says, I am on my bed that I'm about to die, and I'm looking at my left and my right. أنظر مرة عن يميني وأخرى عن شمالي إذ الخلائق في شأن غير شأني. And then he describes in another part of the dua, two parts he describes the death and the journey of the day of judgment. Amirul Mu'mineen, he describes the state of death and the state of the ruh coming out of the body. He says it gets to the point where one has no more hearing, no more speech, yet he still sees. He sees people like someone who's hit on the head and is completely intoxicated and dizzy, does not know what people are saying. He sees people talking, but it's only sounds and noises that he hears. He cannot figure because he is so busy with his own thoughts. The Imam describes, imagine tonight is my night, and tonight I am going through that. Am I ready for it? Am I fearful of it? If I'm fearful of it, why is it that I'm fearful? I'm a believer. And if I am a believer, there should be an element of fear, yet the stronger the faith is, the less the fear should be. So the equation goes as follows. One who does not believe is one extreme. He should not fear death because it should be simply the end and there's nothing after it. Freedom, complete freedom from all the pains and sufferings of this world. Every type of pain and suffering. The physical one, the emotional one, the social one. The least is, no matter how hard we try, no matter if you have the wealth of the world, you would still suffer the emotional sufferings. You would still suffer sicknesses and diseases. And you would still suffer aging. One of the fears is aging. We all go through it. We start seeing the gray hair and the wrinkles, and then we can't stop it. You can go and do operations and change the skin on the outside and dye your hair, but you cannot stop aging within you. It won't stop. And so it's a journey we will go through. And it's painful for those who are not prepared for death. It is suffering. And it continues to become worse and worse. So death for those who don't believe should be a good thing. A great thing, in fact. end of any kind of pain and suffering. That is one extreme. As soon as you believe, some level of fear starts. The more you believe in death and in the hereafter, the more you are fearful because of the sins and because of the lack of preparation, the lack of what we call the provision, at-taqwa. فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. Lack of that is the cause of fear. Yet, the more we work and go higher in our work towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the less that fear goes, to the extent that it is completely gone. Somebody comes to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, is death difficult on a believer? Will he be forced to give up his soul? Would the angel of death take it by force? He says, no. How is it, Yabna Rasulullah? If the angel of death does not take the soul of a good believer, we're speaking of the salihin, the righteous ones. If the angel of death does not take it by force, why would he give it? He says, because the believer is then shown his place in paradise. A gate is opened and he is told to look at his place in paradise. And he is told of who is waiting for him. He is told of who is there to welcome him. He is told that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will be there. He is told that Amirul Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi will be there. This is the poem, very famous poem based on the hadith of Harith al-Hamadani, when he came to visit Amirul Mu'mineen, and he told him, amongst many lessons that he taught him, one of them, أعرف الحق تعرف أهله. Then he says to him, Ya Harith, whoever dies will see me. And so the poet came and put it in a very beautiful way, Ya Hara Hamdan man yamut yarani min mu'minin aw munafiqin qubula. Whoever dies will see me. Believer or non-believer will see me, and there will be the difference. The believers will be pleased and the other ones will be regretful. If one is a believer and is preparing and knows that they will be welcomed by Amirul Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, by the Prophet and his progeny, and if they see their places in heavens, why would they want to stay here? Do you not hear, as we describe, or as it is described to us, what happens on the day of Ashura, of how the companions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam were trying to compete on who goes first? They knew what is waiting for them. They could not wait any longer. In fact, staying in this world became hard for them. In another hadith, Amirul Mu'mineen, beautiful statements from Amirul Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It's a shame that, as I mentioned last night, a person like George Jordaq, a Lebanese Christian, writes about the Imam and reads the words of the Imam, memorizes the words of the Imam, yet we, the followers of the Imam, so-called the Shia of the Imam, are very far from the words of the Imam or understanding them, hardly familiar with them. This is a very sad situation. In another statement, in fact, this George Jordaq, he writes one of his volumes on Amirul Mu'mineen, was about the personality of Imam Ali alayhi salam and Socrates. Aliyun wa Socrates. He writes about the personalities of Amirul Mu'mineen and his philosophy, and Socrates, and how it supersedes any philosopher. Not only Socrates and the modern philosophy, any philosophy. In one of the statements of Amirul Mu'mineen, again describing death, he says for the believers, again for those who were preparing for it, it is sweeter than honey, and it is for them like going from a prison cell into a castle. Who would want to stay in a prison cell when they are offered to go into a castle? Maybe if you're from a prison to a dungeon or to that prison cell that's only one person, or from a good place. But if you were told from your prison cell to come to a castle, who would want to stay in a prison cell? This is the state of a believer, a righteous person. And that is why when we read about all the great personalities and all the shuhada, the martyrs especially, go and look at the videos nowadays. They take off some of those who were martyred and their last minutes. You'll see the most beautiful smile on their face. Why? Because they see where they're heading. They're in complete ease. It is no difficult. In fact, it's sweet for them. It is so easy for them. The transition, according to Amir al-Mu'mineen, again in another statement, he says, it is exactly like when a child comes to this world from the womb of their mother. Though it may be a painful transition, but the results of it for a believer is the most beautiful thing. And that pain, he says, or in another place he says, that pain is a purification for them. So that when they leave this world completely and meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment, there's nothing left on them. This is what we learn also from the words of Fatima Zahra salamullah alayha, as she responded to the man through his wife that he asked about whether he is a follower or not, and then she says, if you're not following our words, he said, are we your Shia? She says, if you're following our words, you are. If not, you're not. He said, I perished. Then she says, no, that's not how it works. If you love us and you're trying, yet you fail here and there, then you will be purified either in sicknesses and problems in this world. If not, it'll be your death, a difficult experience of death. Eventually to come to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment completely clean. This is for the believers. And that's why we read in the seerah of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, contrary to his enemies and to his opponents and to those who claim to have a status when they have none in Islam. One of them, when he's struck, immediately he says, go get him, he's the Majusi, he killed me. You read the history and you'll know who I refer to. Yet Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he is struck, he has one statement. The famous statement, after Bismillah wa Billah, he says, Fuztu wa Rabbil Kaaba. I am victorious by the Lord of the Kaaba. By Allah, I am victorious. Now he knows where he's heading, therefore it is the complete pleasure for him. It is no pain, no suffering, it is only pleasure for him. And he only wishes that he is then united soon with Rasulullah. He's waiting to be united soon with Rasulullah. And he fears if he has any sad feelings, it's for his children who will be prosecuted and who will be tortured in this world before, again, through the so-called ummah, before they themselves reunite with him. Sallallahu alayk ya Amir al-Mu'mineen ya Ali ibn Abi Talib ya Hujjat Allah ala khalqih يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عندها الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. After Amir al-Mu'mineen was struck in Masjid al-Kufa in his mihrab, as he was praying his nafilah, he made his statement saying, فُزْتُ وَرَبِّ الْكَعْبَةِ. Then all the believers gather around him. His children gather around him. They take him to the house. He is put in his bed. That day was so difficult on Ahlul Bayt, witnessing the bleeding of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Narrators say that he had wrapped his head with a yellow cloth. His face went so pale and yellow, that was the color of the wrap of the head. The children sitting around him started crying. He says, my dear children, do not cry. You will have your time to cry. You will have your time of pain and suffering. Then they bring the doctor. He says, give him some milk. The poison has gone in his blood. Perhaps some milk will help. Then they hear in Kufa that the cure of Amir al-Mu'mineen could be the milk. Or all the orphans who realized by then who was it that was bringing them food. They line up outside the door of Amir al-Mu'mineen, wanting to cure their Imam, carrying milk for the Imam. As they bring milk for the Imam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, this is the voice of human justice. O believers, O lovers of Amir al-Mu'mineen, let us implement the justice of Ali. That is the right of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says to the people, he says, did you give some food to the captive, to the one who struck me? Then he says, take some of this milk for the captive, for Ibn Muljam. Ya Ali, he just struck you with a poisoned sword. How high is this human being? How high is Ali? That is why they say there is nobody like Ali. Shahriyar, he says, I don't know what to call you. If I call you a human, I have done you an injustice. Yet if I call you God, I have done God injustice. You are not like any, he says. I have not seen someone who is struck by somebody and he is now his prisoner, that he would treat him with so much goodness. Ya Ali, it is only you who would do mudara with the asir. O Father of orphans, O Father of the Ummah, where are you going? Who are you leaving us to? This should be the voice of all the Shia. This should be the voice of all the Mu'mineen. Where are you going, O Father? But this is really the voice of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, the voice of his daughter Zainab Salamullah alayha. She witnessed that one day, and one day in the land of Karbala, she turned to Najaf, she turned to the shrine of Amir al-Mu'mineen, saying, where are you, O Lion of God? أين أنت يا أسد الله الغالب? Your son Hussein is on the plains of Karbala without a helper. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم، إلهي بمحمد وعلي وفاطمة والحسن والحسين وبالتسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، استجب دعواتنا يا الله. Oh Allah, answer the prayers of mu'mineen and mu'minat يا الله. اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية وصدق النية وعرفان الحرمة، وأكرمنا بالهدى والاستقامة، وسدد ألسنتنا بالصواب والحكمة، واملأ قلوبنا بالعلم والمعرفة، وطهر بطوننا من الحرام والشبهة. اللهم شاف مرضانا، ارحم موتانا بحرمة السورة المباركة الفاتحة تحفها صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد